My name is Margaret Wilson, though most folks around here just call me Granny Maggie. I'm 74 years old now, sitting in this rocking chair by the window of my small house in Savannah, Georgia. The sweet smell of magnolia drifts through the evening air, and the sound of children playing outside takes me back to a time when my life felt whole, innocent, unjudged by the kind of heartbreak only family can deliver. You see, when you get to my age, you carry stories inside your chest like heavy stones. Some stories make you smile, some break you down, and others teach you lessons so deep they mark your soul forever. What I'm about to share isn't easy for me. It's about love, betrayal, and the kind of wound that only a sister could leave behind. You see, when I grew up in a small town in South Carolina in the 1950s, our house was nothing fancy, a white wooden home with peeling paint, a wraparound porch, and a big old oak tree in the yard where we used to swing on a rope Daddy tied for us. My sister Evelyn was 2 years younger than me. She had a head full of curly blonde hair and the kind of smile that made everyone fall in love with her. Folks used to say we were as close as two peas in a pod. But in truth, Evelyn always had something about her, something slippery, something that made me feel like I needed to hold on tighter than she did. Mama would always say, "Maggie, you're the strong one. Evelyn's the delicate one." And so I was the one who looked after her. I tied her shoes when she couldn't. I shared my school lunch when she gave hers away for attention. And I even took the blame when she wrote Mama's favorite vase. I didn't mind. She was my little sister, and I thought protecting her was my duty. As we grew older, I learned that love can blind you to the truth. Evelyn liked to charm people. She liked to be in the center of attention. Boys would notice her first, teachers would excuse her mistakes, and neighbors would gush about how pretty and sweet she was. And me? I was the dependable one. The one who stayed behind to help Mama would suffer. The one who studied hard. The one who didn't shine as brightly, but was always steady. Still, I loved her. Lord knows I loved her. When I was 20 and she was 18, our paths started to split. I met James at church. A tall, kind-hearted man with soft brown eyes and a laugh that filled a room. He worked at the local hardware store, saving up to buy his own place. I swear, from the first time he walked me home, I knew he was the one. We got married the next year under that same oak tree in our yard. It was the happiest day of my life. But it was also the first time I saw something in Evelyn's eyes I didn't recognize. Envy. She hugged me, smiled for the pictures, and tossed the rice with the others. But when I looked into her eyes, I saw it plain as day. She wasn't happy for me. She wanted what I had. Life carried on. James and I built a small home on the edge of town. Nothing grand, but filled with love. Soon after that, I gave birth to our daughter, Sarah. Holding that baby in my arms, I thought my heart might burst with joy. Evelyn was around then, still unmarried, still drifting. She visited often, always cooing over Sarah, always complimenting James, always reminded me how lucky I was. I didn't see the danger then. Maybe I didn't want to. One evening, when Sarah was about 3, Evelyn came by with a bottle of wine. James was working late, and we sat on the porch sipping and talking.
She leaned back on her chair and said, "Maggie, you don't know how good you have it. You got the husband, the child, the home, and me, I got nothing." I reached for her hand and said, "You'll find your path, Evelyn. Don't rush it. You've always had a way of getting what you want." She laughed then, a strange laugh that chilled me. She looked at me with those blue eyes sharp as glass and whispered, "You're right, Maggie. I always get what I want." At the time, I brushed it off, but looking back now, I realize it was the beginning of the storm that would tear my life apart.
After that evening on the porch, I began to notice little things, the kind of things you don't want to believe about the people you love. Evelyn had a way of lingering when Yumes was around, laughing a little louder at his jokes, brushing her hair back just so, leaning in close when she spoke. James, bless his heart, didn't seem to notice. He was the kind of man who treated everyone kindly. If Evelyn needed help fixing something in her apartment, he'd drive over and take care of it. If she needed money to tie her over, he'd slip her a few dollars without a second thought. That was his way. He wanted to help. But deep down, I felt something unsettling growing. It was like standing in a room where the air gets heavy, and you don't know why until the storm finally breaks. One Sunday after church, Evelyn showed up at her house wearing a bright red dress. She wasn't usually one for church clothes like that, but she looked dazzling. Too dazzling. I caught her standing in the kitchen pouring coffee for James, her hand brushing his just a little too long. When I walked in, she smiled at me, that sweet sister smile I'd seen 1,000 times before. But behind it, I saw something sharp. I tried to ignore it. Lord knows I tried. I told myself I was imagining things, that my own insecurities were painting shadows where there weren't any. After all, this was my sister, my flesh and blood. Betrayal wasn't something that crossed my mind. Not then. Time went on and Sarah grew. She was 6 years old when James and I decided to buy a bigger house just outside Savannah. It was the kind of home we'd dreamed of. A 2-story with white shutters and a big yard for Sarah to play in. Moving day was hectic, boxes everywhere, Sarah chasing after the movers, and Evelyn, well, she was right there in the middle of it. She insisted on helping, insisted on being part of every decision. "This should go here, Maggie. That looks better there." At first, I thought she was just being her usual bossy self. But when she started giving James orders instead of me, I thought that old unease stir again. One evening, after the boxes were unpacked and Sarah was asleep, I asked James, "Do you think Evelyn's around too much?" He looked at me surprised. "What do you mean? She's your sister. She just wants to help." I nodded, but my stomach twisted. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I was jealous of my own sister's closeness with my husband. But the truth was, James was mine. My life, my love, my safe place. And Evelyn was starting to step into spaces that weren't hers to claim. The breaking point came a year later. It was summer evening, hot and sticky, the kind of night when you sit out on the porch just to catch a breath of air. Sarah was at a sleepover, and I had gone to visit Mama, who wasn't feeling well. James stayed home to mow the lawn. I remember driving back, humming to myself, when I saw Evelyn's car parked out front of my house. My first thought was simple. Oh, she must be dropping something off. But when I stepped inside, my world cracked open. Evelyn was in my living room with James. And it wasn't innocent. They jumped up the second they saw me, guilt written plain across their faces. James stammered, trying to explain, but I couldn't hear a word. My ears rang, my chest felt hollow, and my knees nearly gave out beneath me. My sister. My own sister.
The one I had tied shoes for, shared lunches with, defended, loved. She had betrayed me in the cruelest way a sister could. I remember looking at her, her lips red, her hair tangled, her eyes wide, not with shame, but with defiance. She didn't apologize. She didn't beg forgiveness. She just stared at me like she was daring me to say something. And James? Oh, James, my heart, my husband, my partner. His face crumbled with regret. But the damage was already done. That night, something inside of me broke. The kind of break that never fully heals no matter how much time passes.
I couldn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor, the old clock ticking louder than I'd ever noticed before. James sat across the room, his head in his hands, whispering apologies that felt like empty echoes. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I just sat there, numb, because sometimes pain is so deep it doesn't even give you tears. When the sun came up, I packed a small bag and took Sarah to Mama's house. She was only 7 then, too little to understand what was happening, though she looked at me with those big brown eyes and asked, "Mama, why are you sad?" I kissed her forehead and said, "Don't worry, baby. Mama's just tired." The days that followed were a blur. James tried to call, tried to visit, begged me to talk to him. Evelyn, on the other hand, disappeared. Not a single call, not a single knock at my door. She'd done her damage and slipped away like a snake into tall grass. Mama could see the hurt on my face. She held me close, rocking me the way she did when I was a little girl. "Maggie," she whispered, "some wounds cut deeper because they come from the people you never expect. But don't let this destroy you. You've got Sarah. You've got a life to live." But at night, when Sarah was asleep and the house was quiet, I broke down. I replayed it over and over. Evelyn's face, James's guilt, my whole world collapsing in an instant. Betrayal is a funny thing. It doesn't just hurt your heart. It eats away at your sense of self. I questioned everything. Was I not enough as a wife? Was I foolish as a sister? Had I ignored the signs God placed in front of me? Weeks turned into months. James moved out for a while, though he kept coming by with gifts for Sarah, with pleas for forgiveness. I couldn't even look at him without feeling that same hollow ache. As for Evelyn, word got around town. Small towns have a way of chewing up secrets and spitting them out for everyone to taste. Folks whispered in church pews, at grocery stores, at the diner. Some pitied me, some judged me, but all of them looked at Evelyn differently now. One day I finally saw her again. I was walking downtown holding Sarah's hand when Evelyn stepped out of a boutique. She looked as polished as ever, her blonde hair shining in the sunlight. Her eyes met, and for a moment I thought she might look ashamed, might try to explain, might even say she was sorry. But she didn't. Instead, she smirked. That same smirk she wore when we were children, as she got away with something. That smirk was like a knife twisting in my chest. I gripped Sarah's hand tighter and walked past without a word. That night I prayed harder than I ever had before.
I asked God to give me strength, to show me what to do, to heal the wound I couldn't seem to close. And slowly the answer came to me. I couldn't let bitterness eat me alive. I couldn't let Evelyn's betrayal or James's weakness define the rest of my life. I had to stand tall for Sarah, for myself, for the woman that I still was beneath the pain. So I started over. I found work at a little bakery in town. The pay wasn't much, but it gave me purpose. The smell of bread baking, the laughter of customers, the rhythm of kneading dough, it became therapy for my broken soul. Sarah would come after school and sit at a corner table doing her homework, and I look at her and think, this is why I keep going. But as the years passed, Evelyn Shadlow never really left. She would pop up now and then, always with that same polished smile, always trying to remind me she was still around. And every time I saw her, my heart ached, not just because of what she'd done, but because she was my sister. The sister I once adored. The sister I had lost to envy and selfishness. And yet deep inside me, a seed of something stronger began to grow, a seed of resolute. Because one day I knew there would be a reckoning.
Years went by, and life found its own rhythm again. Sarah grew like a weed, tall and beautiful, with her daddy's gentle eyes and my stubborn spirit. James and I, well, we never went back to what we once had. He tried, Lord knows he tried, but some cracks run too deep to be patched. We stayed civil for Sarah's sake, but the warmth, the trust, it was gone. Eventually, he moved on, and though my heart still ached, I let him go. But Evelyn, she stayed in the background like a ghost that refused to leave. Every so often, her name would come up at church, in passing conversation, or from folks who'd seen her with one man or another. She had a way of slipping into people's lives, taking what she wanted, and moving on before the damage was done showing. For a long time, I tried to bury my bitterness. I wanted to raise Sarah without the poison of anger inside me. I didn't speak ill of Evelyn to her, though sometimes Sarah would ask, "Mama, why don't we see Aunt Evelyn anymore?" I'd just smile and say, "Because some people walk a different path, baby." But life has a strange way of circling back on itself. When Sarah was in her 20s, she met a man. His name was David, and from the moment I laid eyes on him, I knew he was good. He was steady, hard work, and respectful, the kind of man who looks at a woman and sees her heart, not just her face. I watched Sarah glow around him, the same way I once glowed around James. And for the first time in years, my heart dared to hope again. They dated for 2 years before he proposed. The night Sarah came home with that ring on her finger, she cried happy tears, and I cried with her. After all her hurt, all her betrayal, I thought maybe God was giving our family a chance at redemption through the next generation. But wouldn't you know it, Evelyn showed up again. She hadn't been at any family gatherings for years, but when word spread about Sarah's engagement, suddenly she appeared at my doorstep, dressed to the nines, her smile as sweet as sugar. "Maggie," she said, hugging me like nothing had ever happened. "I heard the good news. I just had to come see my niece." I froze. My first instinct was to slam the door, but Sarah, bless her forgiving heart, rushed forward and embraced her aunt. "Aunt Evelyn, I've missed you." I stood there stunned, watching history threaten to repeat itself. Evelyn inserted herself quickly, helping with wedding plans, offering to take Sarah dress shopping, showing up uninvited to dinners. And every time I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise.
She was charming David, laughing at his jokes, brushing his arm as if it was second nature. One evening, after a family dinner, I pulled Sarah aside. My voice trembled as I said, "Baby, I need you to be careful with your Aunt Evelyn." She frowned. "Mama, I know you and Aunt Evelyn have history, but she's been so sweet to me. Don't you think it's time to forgive?" I swallowed hard, the words bitter in my throat. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. Some people don't change, Sarah. She gave me a soft smile, the kind that only a daughter can give her mama, and said, "You've been carrying this hurt for too long. Maybe she's not the same person anymore." But deep down, I knew Evelyn. I knew her hunger, her envy, her need to take one wasn't hers. And I feared that just as she once set her eyes on James, she might do the same with David. And Lord help me, I wasn't about to let that happen.
I started paying close attention after that. A mother's instincts are sharp, and mine were sharpened even more by old scars. I noticed the way Evelyn will linger near David at family gatherings, the way her laughter grew softer when she spoke just to him, the way her hand sometimes rested on his shoulder a second too long. To anyone else, it might have seemed innocent, but to me, it was déjà vu. One night after supper, I caught Evelyn and David standing out on the porch. She was leaning in, talking low, her face lit up with that same charm she had always used like a weapon. David laughed politely, but I saw the discomfort in his body, the way he shifted his weight, the way he looked toward the door as if hoping someone would step in. That someone was me. I opened the door and called, "David, can you help me with these dishes?" He came right inside, almost relieved. Evelyn followed slowly with that little smirk tugging at her lips, the same one I'd seen the day she destroyed my marriage. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by my window, praying, asking God why this same trial had come back to me through my daughter. Was it to test me? To see if I learned? If I protect Sarah in the way I couldn't protect myself all those years ago? The answer I knew was yes. So, the next day, I asked David to meet me for coffee, just the two of us. He looked nervous, probably wondering what on earth his fiance's mama wanted to talk about. When we sat down, I took a deep breath and said, "David, I need to tell you something about my sister." He listened quietly as I told him about James, about Evelyn, about the betrayal that had nearly broke me. My voice shook, but I spoke plain. "She hasn't changed, David. I can see the way she looks at you. I can see her trained the same tricks. And I'll be damned if I let history repeat itself with my daughter." For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he reached across the table and placed his hand gently over mine. "Maggie, I respect you for telling me this, and I want you to know something. I love Sarah. Only Sarah. Nothing and no one could come between us." Tears filled my eyes then, but they weren't for pain this time. They were for relief. Still, I knew Evelyn was going to stop on her own. She never did until she got what she wanted, or until someone stood in her way. The road test came a few weeks later. Sarah was at work and David had stopped by the house to drop off some things for the wedding. I was out back hanging laundry when I heard voices inside. I stepped in quietly, and what I saw nearly set my blood boiling. Evelyn that cornered David in the kitchen. She was leaning close, her hand brushing his chest, her voice dripping like honey. "You don't have to marry Sarah. You deserve someone who understands you better. Someone like me." Before David could respond, I stormed in.
Evelyn!" My voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it. She spun around, startled, but she didn't look ashamed. She never did. "You need to leave," I said firmly, pointing to the door. David backed me up immediately. "You heard her, Evelyn. This isn't happening. Ever." For the first time, I saw a crack in her confidence. Her face twisted, not with guilt, but with fury. She hissed under her breath, "Just like always, Maggie. You think you're better than me. But one day you'll see. You can't stop me." But she was wrong. Because this time I did stop her. I marched to the door, flung it open, and said, "Get out. And don't you ever come near my daughter or her fiancé again." She left that day, heels clicking down my walkway, her pride bruised, her eyes burning. And as the door shut behind her, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and strength. Sorrow, because she was my sister. Strength, because I had finally stood up in a way I didn't have a few years ago. This time, she wasn't going to ruin my family.
The weeks leading up to Sarah's wedding were a storm of emotions for me. Joy and pride at seeing my daughter step into her own happiness, but also fear. Fear that Evelyn might try again to slip in through some crack in the door I hadn't noticed. I kept my guard up. Every phone call, every knock at the door, every unfamiliar car that slowed down outside the house, it all made my heart race. I wasn't just protecting Sarah's wedding day. I was protecting her whole future. But to my surprise, Evelyn stayed away. No calls, no letters, no sudden appearances at the dress shop or the church. Maybe the confrontation in the kitchen had scared her off. Or maybe she was biding her time. With Evelyn, you can never be sure. On the day of the wedding, the church in Savannah was filled with sunlight. The white lilies on the altar smelled sweet, and the choir hummed softly as guests took their seats. When I saw Sarah walk down the aisle in her lace gown, holding David's hand, I thought my heart might burst. For that moment, it felt like all the scars, all the years of hurt were worth it, just to see her shine. The vows were spoken, the rings exchanged, the kiss sealed it all. The room erected in applause. I held back tears, whispering a thank you to God under my breath. But just as we left the church and walked toward the reception hall, I saw her. Evelyn? She was standing across the street, dressed in black, her blonde hair pinned neatly, her lips painted crimson. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't crying. She was just watching like a shadow that refused to let me go. I froze for a moment, my stomach knotting. David followed my gaze and gently touched my arm. "Don't worry," he whispered. "She can't touch us. Not anymore." He was right. Evelyn didn't step closer, didn't call out, didn't cause a scene. She was just standing there, her eyes locked on me, until finally she turned and walked away. That was the last time I ever saw her in person. Years went by, and Sarah built her own family with David. They had 2 little girls, and I became Granny Maggie, the happiest title I've ever worn. Watching those children run around the yard, laughing, calling my name,
It healed me in ways I can't explain. But Evelyn's ghost lingered. Sometimes I'd hear rumors. She moved to Atlanta. She got involved with another man, snatched everything in some scheme. I never reached out, and she never came back. Part of me still ached, still longed for the sister I used to know, but another part knew better. Some people don't change. Some people only bring fire into your home. The real justice came not from revenge, but from living well. One afternoon, years later, I got a letter. The handwriting was shaky, but I knew it immediately. It was Evelyn's. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, she wrote only a few lines. Maggie, I've made a mess of my life. I thought I was winning, but I've lost everything. You were always the strong one. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you found peace. I sat there, holding that letter, tears streaming down my cheeks. For the first time, I didn't feel anger toward her. I felt pity. She had chafed envy her whole life, and in the end, it had left her empty-handed. I whispered, I forgive you, Evelyn, but I can't let you back in. And that was the lesson. Sometimes forgiveness is not about letting someone return. It's about setting yourself free.